A little Bible trivia for you today. Most of us remember the feeding of the 4,000 and the 5,000 in the New Testament when Jesus took a little bit of bread and a little bit of fish and fed multitudes of people. But can you tell me where and what the circumstances were in the Old Testament when there was a miracle of feeding of multitudes of people with just a small supply? I'll give you a minute to think about that. It's found in the Old Testament in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 4, verses, about 35 and following. You find the story of Elijah. And it's quite an interesting story because here it says they came with barley loaves, 20 of them, and he gave it to the people to eat. And of course, they didn't think it was going to be enough for the number of people that were gathered there. And Elijah said, but give it to the people and let them eat. And it was over 100 men. And they ate, and there was leftovers. Now, anytime you have leftovers with men, that's quite a miracle by itself. But here was 100 men being fed with just 20 barley loaves, and there was food left over. I can remember when I was first married, my take-home pay was probably right at $100, and yet somehow we wound up eating all we needed to eat and had leftovers. And my guess is God supplied for you just the same way at various points of your life and regardless of your income. It's really quite interesting because before this little story in 2 Kings chapter 4, there's another story about a poison stew, and that brought a chuckle to my mind as I was thinking about that story, because when my mother left us, my dad had to do the cooking and taking care of raising my brother and I. And one day he made a very wonderful beef stew, and we raved about how good it was. But Dad hadn't measured anything going into that beef stew, and having been complimented on that beef stew, he prepared another beef stew another time later, and just threw everything in just like he did the first time, but again without measuring, and it was the most terrible stew you ever wanted to taste. So here Elijah had taken a poisonous beef stew and thrown some ingredients into it and made it palatable so that the people could eat it. And I think it's a funny story, but I think it's even funnier when I think back on my dad's beef stew. Well, that's your thought for the day. I know God's going to supply your needs, and there'll always be a little left over besides, because God is a God of taking little and making it into much. That's your thought for the day. God bless.